had read it, which turned out to be the right tactic, because the girl enthusiastically replied that it was the famous detective novel, The Secret of Baron Manor. It turned out that Decker was a fan of such books, and upon learning that Dorothea had read this one, Decker reacted with great excitement, which was unusual for him. Decker asked to name the criminal, but then instantly changed his mind, which caused Dorothea to laugh, who assumed that the man really liked detective stories. With a smile, Decker explained that he first became acquainted with detective stories in the capital, and this genre captivated him so much that he read them all night long. Dorothea listened with a soft smile to Decker's story about books, thinking that before he had frightened her, but now he had revealed a completely different side. Smiling even wider at her thoughts, Dorothea interrupted Decker and offered him her book, since he liked detective stories so much. Decker asked if Dorothea would get into trouble with Giles for lending her book, but she assured him that her father always said she should share her books with others. Decker was reassured by this explanation, and laughing, said that he would be glad if Dorothea would lend him a book, since in Zero he could only buy 3 because books were too expensive. This surprised Dorothea. She knew that Carlyle had allocated a large sum for the restoration of Pervaz, but it was strange to her that at least part of the money was not allocated to the knights as compensation. Dorothea asked why this had happened, to which Decker explained that Asha had wanted to negotiate compensation for them, but all the knights had refused, as they considered it more rational to direct all finances to the restoration of Pervaz. Dorothea was embarrassed, thinking that such a question might sound rude, and explained that she did not mean to offend anyone, but Decker replied that he already knew that. With a final smile and another thank you for the book, Decker said goodbye to Dorothea, refusing to let her leave this place. Waving goodbye to Dorothea, Decker told her that if he saw Giles, he would never tell him where his daughter was hiding. As Dorothea watched Decker leave, she thought that taking several detectives with her to Pervaz had been one of her best decisions. The time had come for Gabriel to arrive in Pervaz, and Asha and Carlyle came out to greet him. Asha bowed in greeting. Carlyle expressed regret that the high priest had to suffer because of the Empress's unfounded worries, but Gabriel assured him that nothing was more important than the birth of a child. Carlyle categorically disagreed with this, stating that in fact many things could be more important, but it was worth starting with how not to jeopardize the health of the future prince of the empire. Carlyle's jab reached Gabriel, but he pretended nothing had happened, and replied that this was the first time he had heard of any threat to the heir's health. Asha decided to intervene in the conversation, sensing the tense atmosphere, and hastened to introduce herself. Gabriel apologized for the late greeting, and wished Asha the blessings of the goddess of wisdom and love, Aphrodite. Asha, inviting Gabriel to follow her to the castle, noted that she would still prefer the blessing of a completely different deity. At the entrance to the castle, Asha apologized to Gabriel for the many things missing from the old castle, but Gabriel assured her that the inside was better than he thought. In a sympathetic tone, Gabriel shared with Asha that he had heard that Pervaz was short of resources due to the war, to which Asha responded that, thanks to Carlyle, Pervaz was thriving. Gabriel noted that he had heard about Carlyle's help to Pervaz, but there was still a but. Gabriel said that no matter what Carlyle's interference was, Pervaz was actually revived only thanks to Asha's courage and efforts. Asha nodded and thanked Gabriel, but she thought to herself that the priest did not sound sincere and that he was trying to sow discord between her and Carlyle. Deciding not to dwell on it, Asha showed Gabriel his quarters and wished him a good rest. After finishing with Gabriel, Asha went to find Carlyle to share her thoughts with him. Having found Carlyle, Asha came closer and said that although there was nothing suspicious yet, Gabriel was praising her for some reason, while trying to set her against Carlyle. Carlyle noted that Asha was surprisingly anxious and seemed to have fallen under Gabriel's magical spell. Asha didn't understand what Carlyle meant exactly, and he explained that it wasn't only women who could use their natural charm to throw people off guard. Seeing that Asha had not yet fully understood his words, Carlyle asked why the hall of an ordinary high priest was always filled with believers. Now Asha understood, but it still remained unclear to her why Gabriel would use his influence on her, and also why someone like her needed to dress up to meet him. Carlyle didn't like Asha's self-deprecating words, and he decided to ask why Asha was saying that. Carlyle's sudden change in mood from a lighter one threw Asha off balance, and she asked with genuine confusion if she had said anything wrong. Carlyle decided not to explain to Asha the reason for his displeasure, only confirming that she had indeed said a lot of unnecessary things. Without giving Asha another chance to say anything, Carlyle turned abruptly and walked forward. Asha looked thoughtfully after Carlyle, tapping her finger on her cheek and trying to understand what had caused such a sharp change in her husband's mood. Shortly after, a dinner was scheduled, which Carlyle, Gabriel, and Asha were to attend. The atmosphere at the table was gloomy, which was also conveyed to the servants who carried food and drinks. Gabriel held his glass thoughtfully in his hand, thinking about how Carlyle was completely indifferent to his arrival in Pervaz, and, apparently, this was due to the lack of faith for which Carlyle was punished by the attack of the barbarians. Carlyle, apparently tired of the silence at the table, decided to start a conversation with Gabriel, more like an interrogation. The first question Carlyle decided to ask was what exactly Gabriel planned to bless Carlyle and Asha's marriage with. Putting on a polite smile, Gabriel calmly replied that he had come to bless the couple to conceive a child. Carlyle chuckled and decided to clarify whether this meant that the Empress was eager to see her grandchildren soon. Gabriel confirmed the Empress's expectations, and with the same smile, said that the continuation of the family line was very important for the future of the country, which did not please Carlyle very much. Without hiding his sarcastic mood, Carlyle asked whether it was then considered a good thing for any member of the ruling family to sow their seed everywhere for the sake of their future. Carlyle's words knocked Gabriel's mask of goodwill off his face, clearly showing that such suggestions sounded unacceptable to him. Carlyle chuckled contentedly and asked if the high priest was really embarrassed to hear such words, since he should have understood the hint correctly, unless the Empress had forgotten to explain what exactly happened in the imperial palace. Gabriel, with an impassive expression, replied that he had no choice but to believe the objective explanation of the situation. Carlyle dismissed this as an excuse, but said out loud that the episode had apparently left Gabriel's mind, but that wasn't all that important. But in the end, Carlyle decided to go straight, so he asked Gabriel if he could swear to God that he had nothing to do with the situation when Carlyle was accused of having an intimate relationship with the Emperor's favorite. Keeping his cool and smiling, Gabriel swore in the name of God that he had nothing to do with it. Gabriel's fingers, however, were crossed under the table so that neither Carlyle nor Asha would notice, and Gabriel himself believed that even God would forgive him for this little lie. Carlyle pretended to believe and relaxed, and Gabriel was surprised that Carlyle had gotten rid of his suspicions so quickly. Setting down the glass of wine he had just sipped from on the table, Carlyle asked how exactly Gabriel would bless him and Asha, and whether the priest really needed to enter the couple's bedroom in order to bless them. Gabriel's positive answer brought Asha, who had been sitting in silence until then, out of her reverie, and she indignantly asked what exactly this meant. With a smile and honest eyes that said this was exactly how it should be, Gabriel replied that he would give Asha and Carlyle a blessing from behind the curtains and then quietly leave. Carlyle wanted to know if that meant that he and Asha simply needed to be in the same room for the blessing to be given, but Gabriel pointed out that it wasn't that simple, since if a couple couldn't conceive a child, it could mean that they weren't having sex. With the same honest eyes, Gabriel admitted that he himself would be glad to believe it in words, but he had an order from the Empress, which he could not violate. This news did not please Carlyle and Asha, who thought that it would be a little easier to deceive Gabriel. And Gabriel thought that, looking at Carlyle and Asha, one could easily imagine how awkward the atmosphere around them became when the two of them were in the bedroom. Carlyle decided to try to avoid such a situation, so he asked what would happen if he refused to receive the blessing to conceive a child in this way. When asked about the possible reasons for such a decision, Carlyle irritably asked if Gabriel had thought about Asha's feelings, who would have to have sexual intercourse with her husband in front of strangers. This attitude towards Asha surprised Gabriel. He did not think that Carlyle would worry about his wife's feelings, and replied that he understood that it could be difficult for a woman, but having a child was Asha's direct responsibility. Carlyle didn't like these words. He squeezed the arm of the chair, saying that apparently the temples liked to impose duties on women, since all the priests were always men, and decided to clarify whether this was said in the name of God. Gabriel was surprised that Carlyle was interested in God's will, but Carlyle clarified that Gabriel was only human, and he was curious if there was anything in the scriptures about such duties for women. The comparison with an ordinary person infuriated Gabriel. He clenched his fists under the table and tried to exhale so as not to arouse Carlyle's unnecessary suspicions, so that he could later found the kingdom of God without succumbing to the momentary temptations of the devil. Quickly composing himself and putting a polite smile back on his face, Gabriel stated that Carlyle's concern for God's will was truly admirable, and with such an attitude, Just a couple of blessings during the golden hour should be enough. And with that, the conversation ended. After some time, Asha came to their temporary shared bedroom with Carlyle, wrapping herself in a warm shawl so as not to freeze in the cold corridors of the castle. As she took off her shawl, Asha admitted that she felt very uncomfortable when she thought about Gabriel planning to grace them with his presence in the bedroom during intimate relations, and they would have to pretend every other day starting next week. Looking down, trying to hide her embarrassment at everything that was happening, Asha noticed that it looked like Gabriel was planning to be present in their bedroom several times. In an attempt to reassure Asha, Carlyle said that Gabriel himself would probably feel awkward as well and lamented the complete absurdity of making love every other day in an attempt to conceive a child. Carlyle continued that what was even more absurd was that they didn't actually want a child, while Asha wearily put her hand to her face and thought about how she should behave in this situation, because she had agreed to this out of necessity, but so far it all seemed impossible. Carlyle sighed and said that in any case, they would be better off sleeping together from this week onwards, and smiling and holding out his hand to Asha, he added that from now on, he was under her care. These words surprised Asha, but quickly pulling herself together, the girl shook Carlyle's hand with the phrase that it made sense for her to ask for guardianship. Carlyle turned around abruptly, ending the conversation, and declared that he was very tired, so he was going to bed. Carlyle lay down on the only bed in his and Asha's bedroom, covering himself with a large blanket. Carlyle opened one eye and watched Asha with interest, wondering where the girl would decide to sleep, since the sofa and chair were uncomfortable, and there was a lot of space in the bed. Asha stood in the middle of the room, hesitant. The girl was tormented by the same thoughts as Carlyle. Having finally managed to make a decision, but not having overcome her shyness, Asha wished Carlyle good night and headed towards the bed. Asha decided to choose the sofa and had already started to lay down there, which did not really please Carlyle, who even sat up on the bed in indignation. Carlyle wanted to stop Asha and even started to say that she shouldn't lie down on the couch. Carlyle decided not to finish his sentence as he settled back down on the pillows, because even if he explained that Asha's back would hurt after sleeping on the couch, it wouldn't make her change her mind. Wrapping himself more tightly in the warm blanket, Carlyle couldn't help but ask Asha if she was cold. Asha replied that she did not, but Carlyle still invited her to lie down on the bed with him, asking if the reason for her refusal was only her mistrust of Carlyle. He greatly embarrassed the girl with this question. Asha said it wasn't a matter of mistrust, and Carlyle suggested that they switch places so that Asha would finally get into bed. Asha responded very abruptly that she simply didn't want to go to bed, which left Carlyle very confused. Wrapping herself in her blanket, Asha explained that she had already managed to warm up and asked Carlyle to finally fall asleep. Carlyle smiled sadly and turned his back to Asha, saying in parting that in that case the next day they would switch, and Asha would lie on the bed. Finally, both Carlyle and Asha were able to calm down and immerse themselves in the peaceful world of dreams, at least for the time of the night, forgetting about Gabriel and the problems he brought with him. But the morning came quickly, and soon after waking up, Gabriel was in Asha's office and telling her about his desire to bless Pervaz's castle. With a polite smile, Gabriel explained that such old castles could easily be penetrated by negative energy, which could bring misfortune and bad luck to all the inhabitants of the castle, so a blessing was simply necessary. Seeing Asha's distrust, Gabriel suggested that she accompany him around the castle herself, and also feel free to discuss with Carlyle any doubts about the priest's actions. Asha sighed, but didn't refuse, since she absolutely couldn't allow Gabriel to explore the castle alone. Getting up from the table, Asha said that she didn't have much to do right now anyway, so she and Gabriel could walk around the castle right now. Walking through the corridors of the castle, Asha thought that she didn't have much strength anymore, since she hadn't slept well last night, but it was better than aggravating the negative relationship with Gabriel, who in the meantime suggested starting from the highest place in the castle. Asha was somewhat surprised by this proposal and asked if it would be difficult for Gabriel, to which he replied that high ladders were completely normal for priests. Gabriel also clarified that he did not notice a temple in Pervaz, to which Asha said that there really were no temples, because initially Pervaz had a different religion, and after the empire came to Pervaz, barbarian attacks began, so there were simply no resources or money for building temples. Gabriel, hearing this answer, noted that apparently Pervaz's people were unfamiliar with religion and knew little about God. Asha even turned to Gabriel to answer and defend the people of Pervaz, and explained that this was indeed the case if we talk about the interpretation of the scriptures, but the people still pray to God, and the depth of their faith is no less than the people of other places. Asha explained that the people of Pervaz had gone through times when they had no choice but to rely on God and pray desperately, which shocked Gabriel. Bowing his head, Gabriel said he could only imagine how difficult it must have been for Pervaz and pray for the dead. Gabriel's answer surprised Asha. It really sounded like the answer of an ordinary priest who cares about people. So Asha thought that Gabriel didn't look as angry as she thought before. Turning away from Gabriel abruptly and not allowing herself to relax around this man, Asha thought that perhaps it was just his rank, and he was saying what he had to. Walking down the corridor with huge windows, Gabriel noticed that the border was visible from the castle. Asha explained that this was specially done this way so that the enemy could be quickly detected and forces mobilized. Gabriel didn't even have time to think that the abandoned lands he desired were nearby, as Asha herself began to talk about them, saying that the abandoned lands were special and unique, but according to Amir, the beasts and barbarians there were infected with demonic energy. Gabriel was interested in this topic and asked if Asha really believed that the energy in the abandoned lands was demonic. Asha confirmed this and said that this energy was seeping from everywhere in the abandoned lands. This information greatly inspired Gabriel because it turned out that this energy was similar to his, which meant that he could control it without using dark magic spells, although he did not show it, and asked how the war with the barbarians went this year. Gabriel said that Carlyle's army had certainly helped Pervaz, but it seemed that many had suffered anyway, which did not please Asha, and made her answer with complete seriousness that without Carlyle's help, they would have been easily defeated, since the barbarians had suddenly used not only their standard weapons, but also catapults. Gabriel felt that his words had hurt Asha, and she was trying to find out if he was involved in the Empress's actions. Without letting Gabriel know that he had noticed anything, he was horrified by what had happened and asked if the barbarians were behind this, since Carlyle had many enemies, and his presence here would clearly bring sparks of war to Pervaz. These words did not please Asha, and she chose to end the conversation by turning away from Gabriel and resuming her journey forward, saying in conclusion that it was better this way than to be abandoned and die in the Empire. As they walked through the sunlit corridors, Asha warned Gabriel that they were about to come to a place where a priest's blessing was truly required. Asha and Gabriel approached the door, near which there were many more footprints visible than in the other rooms, which made Gabriel think that people came to that room very often. Opening the heavy door, Asha turned to Gabriel and explained that this was the room where the prayer room was located. Asha and Gabriel entered a very small, well-lit room with a cross and a prayer book, where Asha explained that the prayer room was first used by her mother, but after her death, other family members began to come there until only Asha was left, continuing to sincerely believe and pray to God. Gabriel was shocked by this story, and by the fact that Asha in deeply forgotten Pervaz is actually deeply religious and often prays. Asha continued to say that even if a pathetic warrior like her could become a princess, it was impossible to doubt God's care. Gabriel took a liking to Asha because she seemed like a person with a pure heart, grateful to God and the people, which reminded him of who he himself used to be. Gabriel's face darkened because such thoughts led him to the understanding that he himself had already gone too deep into the darkness and would no longer be able to return back to the light. Asha noticed Gabriel's depressed mood and asked what was wrong, but Gabriel was unwilling to share his thoughts, so they simply moved on to the next room. After the walk and blessing of the castle, Gabriel locked himself in his room and decided to pray, asking God for help in understanding whether the path Gabriel had taken was truly correct. Meanwhile, in Zero, there was excitement in Vivian's room because the doctor announced that the woman had finally managed to get pregnant. Realizing the significance of this event, the doctor himself gave the order to report Vivian's situation to Kendrick. Vivian also clarified that this news needed to be shared with the Empress, but very carefully, so as not to upset the woman. When Vivian was left alone in her room with a man who looked like her father, he asked her if she was sure about her decision to become pregnant by another man and pass off someone else's child as the Emperor's. Vivian was furious at the question, declaring that the decision had already been made, everything had been done, and she would do anything to maintain the Emperor's favor. The man was worried that the Emperor might find out about the deception, but Vivian said that she had already taken care of her lover's tongue. The man calmed down after these words, smiling softly, nodding and stating that in that case he believed Vivian. Vivian sighed heavily and became gloomy. She managed to get pregnant. Everything was going according to plan, but it was unclear how the Empress would react to this. There was nothing strange or dangerous in the herbs that the Empress sent Vivian, so the woman could not guess the Empress's motives. Vivian smiled unkindly, thinking that if the Empress decided to ignore the threat to her position, then it would only play into the woman's hands, because Matthias was too stupid to perceive him as a serious obstacle to the throne. Because of this, if Carlyle for some random reason does not return from Pervaz, Vivian's son will be able to become the next emperor. As much as Asha wanted to delay the inevitable, the day had inexorably arrived when she and Carlyle would have to pretend to make love in front of Gabriel. She came into Carlyle's room, who was completely relaxed, and this time chose not to cover his torso with clothes, only throwing a robe over his shoulders. Asha sat down opposite him, immediately showing her uncertainty that they would actually be able to fool Gabriel. In a light tone to reassure Asha, Carlyle stated that even if Gabriel suspected something, he would not go look behind the curtain, which caused the girl to smile slightly in relief. Carlyle poured tea into the cups, handed it to Asha, and asked if she was nervous about what they were about to do. Asha couldn't answer, clenching her hands, and once again withdrawing into herself and her experiences about the situation she and Carlyle found themselves in. Carlyle looked at Asha thoughtfully. He expected that the level of her anxiety would not be so strong, but it was obvious that the girl was having a very difficult time coping with the feeling of awkwardness. Carlyle tried again to reassure her that all this would not last too long. She just needed to be patient for a little while. But this clearly did not reassure Asha, who agreed, but still did not raise her eyes from the table. Carlyle stated that it shouldn't be difficult, and that the girl only needed to breathe heavily, but Asha only looked away and silently sipped some tea. Carlyle also felt uncomfortable, because it felt like he was talking to himself. Having failed to rouse Asha, Carlyle suggested moving to bed, receiving in response the same detached consent. Moving closer to the bed, Carlyle threw his robe off his shoulders, leaving himself completely naked from the waist up. Sitting down on the bed, Carlyle patted the hand next to him, silently inviting Asha to join him. Blushing furiously and standing next to him for a few moments, Asha finally made up her mind and slowly crawled onto the bed, settling down next to Carlyle. Asha and Carlyle looked in different directions, feeling awkward, avoiding even casual glances at each other. The atmosphere became tense. To somehow get rid of the feeling of awkwardness, Carlyle lightly put his arm around Asha's shoulder, noting that her skin was very cold. Startled by the stranger's touch and moving away, but still not raising her eyes, Asha replied that she had a rather thin shirt, so it was indeed cold. Carlyle smiled softly and noted that he had indeed not noticed, and that they should have waited for Gabriel before going to bed. This finally managed to break through Asha's detachment, who shook her head very vigorously and exclaimed that going to bed with Gabriel would be even worse. Asha thought that before, when she and Carlyle were first married, she felt nothing, even when they slept in the same room. But that had changed a lot now. Just when it was needed most, Asha couldn't get away from the situation, and the feelings overwhelmed the girl. There was one more thing that Carlyle suddenly remembered and hastened to remind Asha of. They should start calling each other by their first names all the time, because if they used formal names in bed, it would be really weird. Taking Asha's hand, Carlyle asked if she remembered what she would need to do when Gabriel finally came into the room. Asha nodded and thought about how they would need to treat each other kindly and tenderly, and breathe heavily and languidly, like after several sparring sessions. Lionel knocked on the door, signaling Gabriel's approach, and Carlyle abruptly flipped Asha over so that she was on her back with him hovering over her. With one arm wrapped gently around Asha and the other squeezing her hand, Carlyle stood waiting. There was a more intense knock on the door, and Carlyle realized that Gabriel was very close, which meant it was time to move on to more active actions. Carlyle leaned even lower over Asha, so that from the outside it would seem that the couple was in the midst of the most interesting action. When Gabriel entered the room, the shadows on the curtain and Asha's languid cries really did create the complete illusion that Carlyle and Asha were not shirking their responsibilities to conceive a child. Gabriel tried to focus on what he had come for and soon began to pray. Asha and Carlyle were too tense, but they continued their performance. Carlyle leaned towards Asha, gently touching her neck with his nose and inhaling the girl's subtle scent. Asha hugged Carlyle, tried to relax, and pressed herself closer to the man's body. At that moment, Carlyle pulled back slightly, and he had a fleeting doubt that he and Asha were just playing roles in front of Gabriel. Carlisle leaned even closer to Asha. His lips were near Asha's ear, and unable to restrain himself, Carlisle lightly bit the earlobe, causing the girl to involuntarily and genuinely moan. The situation between Carlisle and Asha was heating up, the awkwardness gradually passing, as well as the tension. Asha also began to doubt that this was just a game, and her face was flushed with not only embarrassment, but also excitement. Hanging for a moment, lost in each other's eyes, Asha and Carlisle pressed themselves against each other, intertwined in a real kiss. Gabriel, meanwhile, had already finished his prayer and felt, to put it mildly, completely out of place. Gabriel wet a handkerchief with cool water and wiped his face, which seemed to be burning from the inside. Gabriel desperately tried to rub even his ears, because the sounds Asha and Carlisle made him feel like they were dirty. Putting the handkerchief aside, Gabriel couldn't help but admit that it all seemed too plausible to be a pretense, although it was strange to Gabriel that Carlisle could have feelings for Asha and care about her. Overcoming his confusion, Gabriel rose from the bench with an evil grin, deciding that Carlisle was simply playing with Asha because he could never love a girl from the countryside, which meant he would have to find another way to break this marriage, perhaps using Asha for this. Entering the prayer room that Asha showed him, Gabriel thought that it would be better not to find out anything about this girl, but immediately corrected himself by saying that he was acting for her benefit as well, because Asha Purvaz should not be near the ignorant Carlisle. In the corridors of the night castle, Gabriel met one of the servants and said that he would like to inspect the castle again to check that he had not missed anything and that all the nooks and crannies were indeed blessed. The young servant enthusiastically volunteered to help Gabriel on his walk, not even suspecting what dark thoughts were in the priest's head. And in their shared bedroom, Asha and Carlisle were finally able to break away from their kiss, which had been going on for too long. Carlisle pulled away from Asha with difficulty, and only at that moment noticed that Gabriel had already managed to leave. The awkwardness kicked in again, and Carlisle moved to his side of the bed, lying on his back, and noticed that Asha had done well. Asha, trying to come to her senses after what had just happened in their bedroom, replied that Carlisle had done a good job too. Asha and Carlisle were able to exhale when they realized it was all over, and Carlisle said with a smile that Gabriel definitely should have bought it. Agreeing with Carlisle's statement, Asha wanted to get out of bed and go to sleep on the sofa, but Carlisle stopped the girl. Grabbing Asha's hand, Carlisle pulled her towards him so that she fell right on top of him, hugged him, and asked her to stay in bed. Asha was shocked by Carlisle's request. The girl's eyes widened in shock, and she again did not know what to answer. Carlisle was not tormented by doubts, so he carefully covered the girl and justified himself by saying that she would catch a cold if she suddenly went out into the cold. Carlisle said, wrapping the blanket even tighter around Asha, that it would be very unpleasant if the girl got sick, which made Asha smile softly, because such care was pleasant. So Carlisle and Asha fell asleep, in the same bed, under the same blanket, and hugging each other, so that under no circumstances would either of them suddenly become cold. In the morning, Asha and Carlisle shared breakfast together, completely getting rid of any tension that might have remained from Gabriel's presence in the bedroom. Carlisle, in a fit of concern, handed Asha a bun, which he himself loved very much and hoped that Asha would like it. Watching with a smile as Asha ate the bun with gusto, Carlisle decided to ask if she really liked it. When Asha responded positively, Carlisle said that were connected with the fact that he planned to gain Asha's trust, and although she was not very fond of appearance, this could help persuade her to allow him to hold a prayer meeting. Just about to leave the room, but before he could, Gabriel felt a sharp pain in his ribs, exhaling sharply and clenching his teeth to keep from screaming. Gabriel fell to his knees, unable to cope with the pain. Beads of sweat appeared on Gabriel's forehead, and he wondered why he had an attack now and whether he had become a demon in pursuit of his goals. Asha's voice was heard from behind the door, asking if Gabriel was okay, and it took him a lot of effort not to groan in disappointment, because showing himself to Asha like this was very dangerous. She could recognize the symptoms of dark magic. But a new attack of pain still tore a groan from Gabriel's lips, causing Asha to burst into the room without waiting for permission. Asha sat down next to Gabriel and, holding him by the shoulders, asked if everything was okay with him. Gabriel replied that everything was fine, but this did not convince Asha at all, because Gabriel was still holding his ribs. Asha wanted to see what exactly was hurting Gabriel, but he flatly refused to take off his clothes, since a priest has no right to allow others, especially women, to see his body. Asha stated that she would immediately call Dr. Carlyle to examine Gabriel. This option was even worse than the previous one, so Gabriel stopped Asha and with trembling hands began to unbutton his clothes. A dark spot appeared in Asha's gaze, and Gabriel could only hope that Asha would not understand anything and that Carlyle would never find out about it. Asha was shocked by the size of the stain and couldn't help but let out a cry of horror. Gabriel didn't have the strength to resist, so he almost began to pray that Asha would not understand anything about his connection with the dark forces. Asha, having recovered from the initial shock, calmly said that it looked like a lingering illness or a birthmark. Gabriel breathed a sigh of relief and wanted to come up with some kind of story, but Asha said that there was no point in making excuses and being embarrassed because there were a lot of people with birthmarks in Pravaz. Gabriel apologized for being rude and quickly confirmed Asha's suspicions about the birthmark, saying that he had had it since birth. Gabriel bowed his head and also explained that he felt uneasy about this stain, so he would be very grateful if Asha kept this information a secret. Asha agreed, and Gabriel relaxed almost completely, but the girl stated that she had one condition. But Gabriel apparently had tense up again in vain, because Asha's condition was only that Gabriel had to take a medicinal bath. This greatly surprised Gabriel, who of all the conditions in the world could not have imagined that the price of someone's silence would be merely taking a bath. Asha explained with a smile that when people have similar pains, they usually take medicinal baths to relieve the pain. Gabriel still couldn't believe that Asha was actually offering him this, and asked in surprise why she was so worried and offering him this, since he was sent to Pervaz by the Empress. Asha said it didn't matter, and stated that loyalty had nothing to do with saving the patient. Gabriel admired Asha more and more because he believed that such thoughts could only be had by saints or sages, but not by a girl from the northern lands. Asha was revealing herself to Gabriel in an increasingly positive light, and he sincerely hoped that he would not have to harm this girl. Bowing before Asha, Gabriel sincerely apologized for his question, which confused Asha, who quickly asked him if Gabriel would still agree to take a medicinal bath. Gabriel gave his consent, and Asha, still unable to overcome her embarrassment, quickly ran out of the room, muttering that she was going to prepare herbs and water. Gabriel had already fully recovered from the attack of pain, so the thought occurred to him that it would be very nice to get closer to Asha. Gabriel, with a colder expression on his face, decided that this rapprochement would greatly help him to learn more about Carlyle's weaknesses. After taking a bath, Gabriel was in a more cheerful mood because it really helped him. As Gabriel passed by Asha's room, he thought it would be a good idea to thank the girl for what she had done, but he noticed the door was open. Outside the door were Carlyle and Asha, who were clearly arguing. You could hear Carlyle reproaching Asha for preparing Gabriel's bath herself instead of entrusting it to the servants. Such groundless accusations outraged Asha, and she also responded to Carlyle in raised tones. Overhearing the argument, Gabriel was surprised that Carlyle, known for his debauchery, had doubts about the relationship between Asha and the priest. Carlyle, meanwhile, continued to scold Asha, noting that he could not imagine that refined and gentle men were her type. Asha wanted to explain and said that Carlyle had simply misunderstood everything, but he no longer heard her and said that he suspected her of treason. Carlyle demanded a rational explanation from Asha that he could believe, which caused Gabriel to sigh heavily and make a decision. Gabriel decided to intervene in the family quarrel between Asha and Carlyle, although he himself did not understand why he did this. Asha and Carlisle were not expecting such an intervention, and Gabriel hastened to explain that he wanted to thank Asha for the healing bath, but accidentally witnessed the quarrel. Carlisle demanded an explanation from Gabriel as to what he was doing outside Asha's chambers at such a late hour. Even though it was only 7 o'clock in the evening, Gabriel sighed and closed his eyes, trying not to react to Carlisle's rudeness, and politely explained that he and Asha had no relationship. He really just wanted to thank the girl for the medicinal and not the usual bath that was made to help improve his health. Carlisle was not much mollified by this, and replied that Gabriel could have asked the servants to take care of the bathroom instead of Asha. Gabriel asked Carlisle gloomily if he really thought he could trust strangers to prepare the bath, and offered to go with him for proof. The bathroom still smelled of medicinal herbs. Carlisle looked hard at Gabriel, not wanting to give in, but also seeing no rational reason for the scandal to continue. Carlisle sighed and admitted that in this situation, he was the one who should give in, and apologize for his outburst. Carlisle explained his behavior by his love for Asha, which led her to think that this was just a performance for one single spectator, who was Gabriel. Carlisle continued and said that Gabriel could tell the Empress that they wouldn't have to wait long for an addition to the imperial family, because there was so much passion between him and Asha. Gabriel did not refuse, replying that he would definitely convey the message, but also noted that the Empress might not believe the words. And in Zero, Charlize and Josephine reported to the Empress about how their meeting with Vivian went. Charlize excitedly told her mother that the atmosphere was tense at first, but they managed to relax Vivian, so she told them that she had only managed to get pregnant thanks to the medicinal herbs sent by the Empress. This caused a strange reaction from the Empress. A short laugh was heard, which made the sisters tense. Soon after this, the Empress laughed heartily and unkindly, declaring that of course she had not sent these herbs to Vivian so that she could become pregnant. After stopping laughing, the Empress said that Vivian had the nerve to thank her for the herbs, pretending that she was carrying the Emperor's child, when in fact Vivian had become pregnant by another man. Josephine and Charlize were shocked by the Empress's statement and could not understand why she was so sure of it. The Empress chuckled and explained that this was part of her plan. She just needed to give Vivian a good excuse. And then the Empress said that in fact the Emperor simply cannot have children. He has been sterile for a long time. Josephine asked how the Empress knew this, and Charlize asked if she should tell the Emperor about it. The Empress leaned back in her chair and explained that she had long ago asked to find out this point secretly, and had deliberately not said anything to the Emperor so as not to upset him. But now the situation was completely different. The Empress ordered Josephine and Charlize to spread rumors throughout the palace about the Emperor's infertility and Vivian's pregnancy by another man. The sisters were hesitant to go that far, but the Empress said that after so many years in the palace without any power, it was the least they could do. This order still clearly did not meet with the approval of Josephine and Charlize, but they could not contradict the Empress either. With a triumphant smile, the Empress asked if she could rely on Josephine and Charlize for this. Even if this decision did not please them, Josephine and Charlize assured the Empress that she could rely on them in any case. The news of Vivian's pregnancy and how the Empress had played it out came to Gabriel. Gabriel poured water for the dove and noted that it would be a good idea to send the Empress a message in response, announcing Carlisle and Asha's marriage, but the two had unexpectedly become too close for that to be possible yet. Gabriel threw the Empress's letter into the fire so that no one else could read it and began to pray. Gabriel, in the process of prayer, remembered the story of Saint Rufus, who alone maintained his faith and defended it from heretics. Gabriel felt that this man reminded him very much of Asha Parvaz because his unwavering faith and self-sacrifice led to a miracle. Asha, despite all the difficulties, always quietly defended the lands of Parvaz without demanding anything in return for herself. Gabriel sincerely prayed that Asha would be the one who would help him create the ideal world that Gabriel dreamed of. Asha stood in Carlisle's office, her hands behind her back and her back perfectly straight, in the midst of a conversation about when Gabriel would finally leave and whether there was any point in discussing his departure and everything that came with it. Carlisle asked Asha if Gabriel had only told her the date of his departure, to which Asha replied that he had, and that Gabriel had also asked to sell the herbs used for the medicinal bath. When Asha mentioned medicinal herbs, Carlisle remembered the scene he had caused the girl over Gabriel's bath and felt a pang of conscience. Asha noticed Carlisle's changed expression and asked him why he asked such a question, but Carlisle just shook his head and replied that he didn't mean anything important. Turning slightly to the side, Carlyle thought that because of Gabriel, he began to react too sharply to many things, which was unusual for him, and moreover, he did not even apologize to Asha for his hot temper. Carlyle decided that the lack of an apology would be something he wanted to correct right away, and he tried hard to find the words, but could only start out as a mumbled murmur. Carlyle, however, was unable to say anything other than interjections, which left Asha a little confused. Carlyle's hesitation gave Asha the wrong idea about what he wanted to say, so she decided to speak for him, and assumed that he was actually glad Gabriel was leaving, since they would no longer have to pretend to be a couple in love. Asha also suggested that Carlyle might be embarrassed by their pretense in front of the guests on the second floor, since they were pretending to be a couple and in front of his real lovers, which confused Carlyle and made him ask who exactly Asha was referring to. Asha asked if Carlyle hadn't wanted to talk about his real lovers and the need to stop playing the married couple. Carlyle was outraged by such a question from Asha. He asked the girl who exactly she was talking about and why she decided that the girls from the second floor were his lovers, specifying who exactly gave Asha such information. Unable to keep a straight face, Carlyle asked Asha if she thought these were the girls he took to his bed every night and treated them the same way he treated his wife. Asha immediately bowed, apologizing and saying that she had said something stupid, which came as a surprise to Carlyle, who again felt that there had been a misunderstanding and hastened to assure the girl that this was not what he had meant at all. Carlyle sighed and more calmly continued to explain to Asha that she had misunderstood everything, swore by all his victories that he had not laid a finger on any of the girls from the second floor, and that they were simply behaving like some kind of his concubines, which was not true. Asha was pleased with the information Carlyle had given her and that he had decided to explain it to her, but she tried to restrain herself and simply replied that she understood everything. Carlyle decided to return to what he had originally wanted to talk about with Asha, and said that the same misunderstanding had happened between them as when Carlyle believed that Gabriel had managed to charm Asha, which had already caused Asha to need to explain that this would be impossible because Asha and Carlyle had signed an agreement. Carlyle responded to this explanation by saying that a person's heart does not obey his mind, hinting that an agreement cannot be an absolute guarantee, but Asha became tense about the fact that Carlyle could notice her feelings towards him. Carlyle finally managed to collect his thoughts and stated that he was done beating around the bush. He just wanted to apologize to Asha. This shocked Asha. Her eyes widened, and she looked at Carlyle in disbelief, only managing to ask what exactly he meant. Carlyle continued and said that he had indeed misunderstood Asha and Gabriel's relationship and condemned the girl without even trying to understand the situation, while Asha, still in a stupor, also apologized for misunderstanding Carlyle. Asha blushed deeply as thoughts appeared in the girl's head that since Carlyle told about his real relationships with other girls and even considered it necessary to apologize, it meant that she could be a special person for him, which was hard to believe. Meanwhile, at the palace, Emperor Kendrick felt it necessary to consult a doctor because he was worried. The doctor hastened to reassure Kendrick and stated that according to all examinations, the emperor was healthy, and therefore the deterioration in his health could be associated with stress. But Kendrick asked if the doctor had heard the rumors that were circulating about the emperor in the palace. The doctor immediately realized his mistake and hastened to apologize to Kendrick, since his previous diagnosis did not concern the spreading gossip. The emperor was not now concerned about the doctor's apologies, or the fact that he had not predicted Kendrick's motives, because he really did often behave unusually. Looking away, Kendrick decided to ask the doctor about the rumors, and whether it was really possible that the emperor was sterile. The doctor replied to Kendrick that he could not immediately make any diagnosis, therefore, in order to make sure that the rumors were unfounded, it was necessary to undergo an examination and subsequently publicly publish the results. For the emperor, this would be the best way out of the situation in which he found himself. Kendrick smiled broadly, approving of the doctor's idea, and stated that he was ready to begin examinations immediately in order to put an end to the baseless rumors as quickly as possible. The doctor bowed and replied to Kendrick that he understood everything, would immediately begin work, and in a few days the emperor would be able to prove to everyone that the rumors were just nonsense. Kendrick leaned back on the couch, smiling smugly and thinking that the problem with the rumors had already been solved, and very soon he would be able to prove to everyone that he did not and could not have problems conceiving children. A few days later, Kendrick stormed into Vivian's room in a rage, accompanied by the Empress, and yelled questioningly at how a woman dared to carry another man's child under her heart. Vivian turned sharply towards the Emperor, the woman's face showing genuine confusion, and she tried to insist that Kendrick couldn't doubt her. But this attempt did not work on Kendrick, who in a raised voice declared that Vivian did not dare to lie to him, because he had just received a conclusion about his ability to conceive children. Behind the Emperor's back, the Empress did not even hide her smug smile. Vivian hugged herself, and still playing the role of offended innocence, asked how it was possible that the Emperor was suddenly sterile. The Empress felt it necessary to intervene, and declared that the fact that Kendrick was infertile meant that Vivian could in no way be pregnant by the Emperor, and the two of them came to her to accuse her of the sin they had committed. This shocked Vivian. The woman could not find the right words that could serve as an excuse. All her plans were destroyed at that moment. The Empress sneered that Vivian had tried to pass off someone else's child as the heir to the throne, and that crime alone would have been sufficient to warrant immediate execution. Vivian gritted her teeth in irritation, realizing that the Empress was enjoying the entire situation with all her heart. Vivian also realized that this had all been planned in advance by the Empress, who had sent her daughters not out of concern, politeness, or anything like that, but simply to mock the unsuspecting woman. The Empress pretended to be very sorry about everything that was happening, and Kendrick told Vivian that he did not expect such an act from her at all, because betrayal and deception of the ruling family are very serious crimes. Vivian, realizing that something urgently needed to be done, fell to her knees in front of Kendrick, lowered her head, and asked the Emperor to forgive her. With a trembling voice, but already raising her head, Vivian told Kendrick that she loved the Emperor very much and wanted to have a child with him, but nothing worked out between them, and disappointment gradually appeared in the Emperor's eyes. Vivian burst into tears, continuing to say that it was very insignificant and sad to never be able to become pregnant from the man she loved, and sharing her fears that the love between her and the Emperor might weaken because of this. The Emperor was no longer furious, but he could not forgive Vivian so easily, calling her a stupid girl and saying that reality remains reality in any case. The Emperor told Vivian that the crime against the ruling family could not be forgiven, although he understood how important it was for a woman to strive for love. The Emperor told Vivian that because of her crime, she would be stripped of her title of Duchess and forced to leave the palace, a decision that did not please the Empress at all, as she did not want to leave Vivian alive. Vivian bowed deeply before Kendrick, without rising from her knees, hiding her face, on which a victorious grin flashed. The Empress had ruined her plans, but while Vivian remained alive, she still had the opportunity to take revenge. Meanwhile, Giles and Cecilia were just discussing the fact that Vivian Lowry had been completely rejected by Kendrick. Giles noted that the Empress had managed to take Vivian out of the game after all. Cecilia confirmed this and expressed her fear that the Empress's power would now grow even stronger, and added that she was interested in Carlyle's thoughts on this matter. Giles noted with regret that the prince's judgment was clouded by his wife, Asha Pervaz, but their marriage would not last long in any case. Giles also stated that Carlyle would definitely become emperor, and that he and Cecilia could only wait for that day. Cecilia asked Giles if he had any ideas on how Carlyle could become emperor sooner. Giles was expecting exactly this reaction from Cecilia, and immediately showed the girl the paper that could help them. The day of Gabriel's departure from Pervaz arrived. Carlyle and Asha went out to see the priest off, asking if he was sure he wanted to leave now, because if it snowed, he risked getting stuck on the road, but Gabriel did not want to stay in Pervaz waiting for the snow to melt. Carlyle asked Gabriel to convey his regards to Kendrick and the Empress, and to reassure them not to worry. Gabriel agreed and hurried into the carriage to leave Pervaz. Asha and Carlyle watched the carriage leave with their eyes. Having confirmed that Gabriel had indeed left Pervaz, Carlyle turned away from the road and noted that another year was almost over. Carlyle asked Asha if they could hang out the next day, which surprised the girl, and she replied that she was not busy with anything, but asked to clarify why Carlyle wanted it. Carlyle, looking into Asha's eyes, replied that as a couple, they needed to spend time alone at the end of the year. Asha had enough of this explanation. She thought that the year really had come to an end too quickly. Asha watched Carlyle leave and thought that there was very little time left before Carlyle left Pervaz. The next day, Carlyle invited Asha to his office, where the girl came, bowing to greet Carlyle, who invited her to sit down. Asha chose to sit opposite Carlyle, still feeling a little unsure of herself around him. To start a conversation, Carlyle asked if Asha would like some tea, specifically noting that he had specifically chosen one with a light aroma. Asha decided to immediately give Carlyle what she had brought with her so as not to forget it later, and began searching in her pockets to see where she had put it. Carlyle asked what exactly the girl wanted to give, to which Asha, handing Carlyle a small box, explained that there was a tradition of exchanging gifts at the end of the year. Carlyle picked up the box, and Asha continued her explanation by saying that she had decided to get a gift for Carlyle this year, even if it was just a small thing. Carlyle opened the box. On a red pillow lay a simple bracelet without any unnecessary details. Carlyle asked what it was. Asha replied that it was a leather bracelet, and thought to herself that perhaps she shouldn't have given anything at all. The gift looked too simple. Carlyle pulled the bracelet out of the box, and Asha continued to think that this was a bad idea. Carlyle could easily afford expensive jewelry. Carlyle put the bracelet on his wrist, remarked that it looked better than he expected, and asked what exactly the gift of a leather bracelet meant in Pervaz. Asha, pleased that Carlyle had accepted the gift favorably, replied that there was no special meaning to the gift. She just wanted to give the bracelet to Carlyle and wish him good health. This explanation made Carlyle darken a little and say that he was not 70 years old, which caused obvious bewilderment in Asha. Carlyle decided not to pursue the topic further, instead standing up from the table and saying that he had also prepared something for Asha, although it was already late for gifts. Taking a small box in festive packaging from the work table and heading towards Asha, Carlyle added that he did not prepare anything special, since if it were a decoration, Asha would sell it and buy equipment for Pervaz's army. Carlyle approached Asha and held out the gift, but the girl did not dare to take the box because she did not expect any gifts from Carlyle. Asha hesitantly took the box and lifted the lid to see what was inside. And inside the box was a bottle of perfume, the smell of which Asha recognized as the same one she had been wearing on her wedding day with Carlyle. Blushing slightly, Carlyle felt it necessary to explain this gift by saying that the scent of this perfume suited Asha. Asha, similarly blushing slightly, thanked Carlyle for such a gift, which brought back pleasant memories. Carlyle sat down next to Asha, explaining that the perfume was specially designed for him, which prompted Asha to ask why Carlyle would give her such a valuable item. Carlyle opened the bottle, dripping some perfume onto his hands, and explained that this perfume suited Asha much better. Touching Asha's neck with his hands, which made her blush even more, he applied the perfume. Carlyle continued to explain that when mixed with the girl's own scent, the perfume becomes sweeter. Taking his time to remove his hand, Carlyle noted the surprising fact that Asha, who lived in the northern lands, was so suited to the herbaceous southern scent. Removing his hand and turning slightly away from Asha, Carlyle said that there was a tradition in which the customer personally named the perfume that was made for him, and asked if Asha would be interested in knowing what name Carlyle had given to the perfume. Asha was confused and no longer sure if she should indulge her interest, but Carlyle said anyway that he had named the perfume Asha. As Carlyle placed the bottle back in the box, he explained to Asha that he wanted her to remember him by wearing the perfume. Looking at Asha and trying to catch her eye, Carlyle asked if it would be exactly as he imagined. Closing the lid of the gift box but avoiding Carlyle's gaze, Asha confirmed that it would be so. Looking away, Asha thought sadly that the smell of this perfume would be poison for her, because when the contract ended, she would still not be able to forget Carlyle. While winter was raging in Pervaz in Palaiseau, a kingdom bordering the empire to the south, people were enjoying a colorful autumn. Several people gathered at the table, and the meeting was led by a pretty blonde, who was the queen of Palaiseau. The queen thanked everyone for accepting her invitation and lamented that it would have been more appropriate to organize a more formal reception, but she was afraid of attracting unwanted attention from the empire. The guests assured the queen that the absence of an official reception would not spoil their impressions in any way, as they could enjoy the beautiful scenery, which reassured the queen. The conversation immediately turned to the topic of the empire, and the queen was asked whether her homeland, Elvenia, was still busy paying reparations to the empire. The queen confirmed that the reparations were still being paid. Elvenia had to give up 12 golden crowns, each decorated with a ruby and sapphire, 100 war horses, and not tax-imported goods from the empire for 20 years, which caused outrage among the guests. The queen was told that these were terrible conditions, but the queen noted that nothing could be done, because while Kendrick could still be controlled, his son, Carlyle, was quite cruel and not amenable to any influence. One of the guests, a red-haired man, asked with a grin if the queen was aware of the latest news from the empire. The man said that Carlyle had dared to attack Kendrick's concubine, so he was sent out of the capital without the opportunity to return. This news encouraged the queen, and she came to the conclusion that no matter what happened in the south, Carlyle would not be able to return to the capital of the empire, and therefore would not be able to somehow interfere with her plans. And after a couple of months, Palaiso declared war on the empire, stating that the empire had long been oppressing the people of the kingdom, and they must return what was taken from them. And the cities burned. The army of Palaiso and his allies began to move deeper into the empire, taking from the common people the last thing they had, to show their strength and determination. The letter that brought news of the war that had begun enraged Kendrick, because he believed that in order to maintain peace in the south, it was enough to put pressure on Elvenia. Clenching the letter in his fist, Kendrick ordered that Matthias be summoned to him immediately, and that resistance units be prepared to respond to the invasion from the south. Matthias was horrified by this news and ran to the Empress to prevent Kendrick from sending him to war. The Empress turned away from Matthias, biting her nail thoughtfully, thinking that she had not planned such events, and that it was all very inopportune now, when Gabriel, with whom she could have come up with a way out, was not in the capital. But an idea did come into the Empress's head. She turned to Matthias with a smile and excitedly told him that nothing would happen to Matthias, and that they could very well use the current situation to their advantage. Placing her hands on Matthias's shoulders, the Empress declared that the departure ceremony must be made as grand as possible, and that Matthias must demonstrate all his confidence as crown prince. Matthias was not inspired by this, and asked the Empress in horror if she really planned to send him to the southern front. With a slight chuckle, the Empress explained that once Matthias left the capital, everyone around would know that he had gone to war, and even if it was known that he had left the battlefield, it could always be said that Matthias was providing tactical command of the army. This plan suited Matthias, and he breathed a sigh of relief, because if there was no need to participate in military operations, he believed that he could easily cope. The Empress praised Matthias and thought with a smile that the knights of the empire could handle the war themselves, and Matthias only needed to look convincing at the departure ceremony to be trusted. And how wrong they were! The duties on the southern front very quickly began to weigh on Matthias. One day, a subordinate ran into his tent, declaring that the outpost of Aphatos had fallen, and Matthias was required to immediately decide where to make the next outpost, in Daphanon or Reina. With horror in his eyes, because this was all new and extremely frightening, Matthias asked if the outpost had really fallen already. The soldier confirmed the information he had given earlier, but Matthias, confused, refused to choose any point, suggesting that his subordinate do this, to which he objected that only Matthias could make such decisions. This enraged Matthias, who stated that he could not believe that the commander of the Imperial Knights was unable to make such a simple decision on his own. The commander closed his eyes nervously, thinking that when they had fought under Carlyle's leadership, situations like this